Dark bleatings, everybody. I'm Kaylee from Happy Go Horror, and today we're going to talk about even more horror books. So far on the channel, I have ranked every Stephen King book, which took me quite some time. I've ranked all of the Adam Neville novels, and try saying that 10 times fast. And I've also talked about my favourite apocalyptic fiction, and something I realised after doing my last video is that so far, overwhelmingly, every single book that I've talked about on my channel has been written by a man. And I love horror written by men, don't get me wrong. You know, Adam Neville is my favourite. I've been reading Stephen King since I was a kid. Absolutely love Tim Levin, Ramsey Campbell, Paul Tremblay. Okay, I have to stop talking about books written by men. I could just list and list and list and list. But where are the books written by women, I hear you ask? So I have decided today to collect a whole pile of my favourite female written horror. We've got some of your sort of classics on there, the things that you might expect to see, and also I'll be talking about some contemporary books, and as well as novels I do have a few short story collections in here as well. So I wanted to give everyone sort of a good range of subgenres, book type, length, and you know, overall themes and all of that kind of stuff. So just wanted to give you a nice little selection, so hopefully there'll be some things here that might take your interest, and maybe I can introduce you to your next great read. So let's get an obvious classic out the way first. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, you know, a lesser known book. I just thought I'd shout out this book, you know, to give it some attention. So this is about Dr. Frankenstein, who wants to create the perfect being, and he uses body parts from several other people to do that. And of course, it's alive, and the town is terrorized, and you know, it's a sad time for Frankenstein's monster. He's someone who lives on the fringe of society. Everyone is afraid of him. Nobody understands him or cares to, and he's not accepted. And that's kind of the overall theme of the book. I have seen a criticism online in recent years that is a woke take on Frankenstein, and the people who say that tend to be the people who think that Frankenstein is the monster. You know, do you know what I mean? They haven't read the book. So it's not a woke take. That is the theme of the book. That's the whole story. After, like, the actual monster creation part is only a little bit of it, and then the rest of it is the monster's journey through, you know, his sad spooky life. So this isn't actually a personal favourite of mine as far as the story goes. I struggle a little bit with classic writing styles, and that's something that's just on me. I've only in my adult years started delving into classic horror, so I obviously read this, Dracula. I tried some H.P. Lovecraft, so I'm trying to get to grips a little bit with these more sort of classic literary styles. So that's why this wouldn't be like in my top 10, but it's definitely still worth mentioning. I'm pretty sure it was the first science fiction book ever written. It's the first one that I can find. If you know of any really great science fiction novels, please let me know in the comments, because I would love to find some, especially if it has kind of a horror slant. I'd love to read a little bit more, you know, so educate me if I'm wrong about that. But yeah, this is for obvious reasons a masterpiece. Next up, I've got two Susan Hill books. So we've got The Woman in Black, and I really love this edition of it. It's so cute, lovely little hardcover with its embossed, you know, detail on the front. And then we have Dolly. So creepy. This is so creepy, and this is also so creepy. I've read this and also listened to the audiobook, and if you're someone who enjoys audiobooks, I normally listen to them when I'm cleaning and cooking or whatever, doing housework. I'll put headphones on and just, you know, trap myself into a book if I have a long boring day of chores. But I also like to listen to books if I go out for a walk, or sometimes if I'm running, but usually I have to listen to the Doom soundtrack to run, or I can't stay motivated. If you do enjoy an audiobook, I would recommend listening to this if you go on a nice evening walk, maybe in the dusky times when it's a little bit spooky, especially in winter. It's a really good winter read. So yeah, I would recommend that. I think everyone knows this is a ghost story. It's pretty creepy. And then Dolly, I mean, the clue's in the title. Who isn't creeped out by that? I don't want to really say anything about it because it's quite a short read. But yeah, if you're someone who really enjoys like spooky Gothic atmosphere, Susan Hill is a really good writer to read, and these are my two favourite books by her. Next up, I'm going to give you something new that came out in the last year. I love this book. It's House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. Her first novel was called The Year of the Witching, and I also really, really loved that one. The reason that I'm mentioning this one is because if you somehow haven't heard anything about this book, just go into it blind. Like, don't read the back cover synopsis, don't look at anything online, just buy the book and then read it. I don't even know if the actual subgenre is revealed in the back cover synopsis. Very possibly, but I didn't know, and I'm not going to tell you where it is, but I really loved it. It's about a woman called Marion who lives in sort of, I think it's like Victorian England sort of time period we're in. So she's living sort of like, she's pretty much on the fringe of poverty, and she works as a cleaner, and she also has to sort of financially support her horrible, horrible brother that doesn't contribute anything. And there are these sort of rich houses in the community dotted around the UK, you know, counts and countesses, and they scout for a particular type of servant. So a certain type of job role is what they're looking for, and Marion gets the opportunity with this particular job role, which is kind of looked down on by regular society because they, you know, people kind of see it as a form of prostitution. But yeah, if you're someone in Marion's position, I would see why this would be a very appealing offer, because you get to go live in a mansion and live a life of luxury. So yeah, so she takes this opportunity, and things quickly turn out to not be quite what she expected when she gets there, and then the horror ensues. It's quite a slow burn on the horror front, but I'd say like the last act of it really like makes up for what you think you might be missing for the rest of the book. So I really, really loved this, and yeah, it's a great read. Next up, we're gonna go with some indie female horror. I've been talking about this book for years. I love it, and it's a short story collection called Disenchanted. Ooh, let's try that again. It's a short story collection called Disenchanted by C.L. Raven. C.L. Raven are Cat and Lynx Raven. They're twins that write together. They're an absolute hoot, those two. Their writing is, I can never tell where one starts and where one ends. They obviously work really, really well together. This this collection is sort of it is a collection of tales, sort of fairy tale like tales, that are very sympathetic towards the characters that would normally be considered the villains. So for that reason, I just found it absolutely hilarious. There's great horror scenes and the kind of stuff you want in these stories, but it's the sense of humor that it's written with is just so funny, and the first story just had me laughing. This book is covered in all sorts of stuff. I've dropped it in the bath, I've spilled tea on it, I've read it a few times. I really, really rate it if you're looking for something a little bit tongue-in-cheek, something obviously with a fairy tale slant, if you like your horror with a side of fairy tale, and yeah, if you'd like to sympathize with a different kind of character for a change, this is a really good book for you to pick up, and I highly recommend it. Next up, let's go with, let me have a look here. Let's go with The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Now, this is a short story. It's really teeny tiny, and in fact, I think there might even be another short story included in this book. It's so small. So when I first encountered this, I was in university still, and I was doing costume design on a theatre production of it that was like a devised theatre piece. And I came to think that maybe all of us were actually living inside the yellow wallpaper by the end of it, cast and crew alike. We were all going a little bit mad. I don't want to say why, but the director had a particular way of working that it kind of broke a lot of us, to be honest with you. So this is about a woman who is diagnosed with like female hysteria, basically, and she's locked in an attic with absolutely nothing to stimulate her, like no entertainment, nothing. And this is written from the perspective of a woman who went through this in real life, because back in the old days when men were in charge of absolutely everything, and you know, if a woman said something out of turn, they would deemed mentally ill, especially if you were disagreeing with a man. This is how they used to treat this. So like if you were a woman that went to the doctor, no matter what your complaint was, if the doctor decided, do you know what, I think she's just hysterical, they would lock you in a room with nothing to read, nothing to do, you know, you're not allowed to write, you can't do a jigsaw puzzle, absolutely nothing. And you're supposed to, I think the idea was basically that you were just sent there till you calmed down. And of course, that produces a whole host of mental health issues if you're locked up for quite a long time. Like, people use isolation as torture. So this book, I think that it actually contributed to changing the way that those medical practices were done. So I think this book is, you know, quite important if you're talking about important works of literature, but also the story is just really great. It's very, very unsettling all the way through, because you're in this poor woman's head and it's infuriating. You know, you're infuriated on her behalf, and then you just start feeling like helpless on her behalf because she's not in control of anything. And it's just, yeah, it really escalates and goes to quite a dark place. It's a really great read. I can't believe it's included on the list, and if anyone that I was in uni with and I worked on that project with watches this video, they will probably be shocked to see me talk about this so favourably, but it's a really, really great read. I say that about everything, don't I? It's a really great read. I'll try to think of some other ending statements going forward. So, the next book I want to talk about, I'm sure plenty of people have heard of Gemma Amor by now. I would say up and coming, but I think her career is like actually taken off, and rightly so. She's really talented. Dear Laura by Gemma Amor, it's sort of novella length, so it's a quick read, but it is not an easy read, so I wouldn't go into this lightly if I were you, because I don't know what I was thinking when I picked this up. I knew it was horror. I had no idea what it was about. And I just went in all swimmingly happy. I don't know where I expected my mind to go, but I was shocked. Shocked, I tell you, by the things that unfold in this book. It's about a woman who, when she was a kid, her best friend was like taken basically by a kidnapper, and she just never found out what happened to him. But every year on her birthday, she receives a letter from the person claiming to have kidnapped this guy, and there's kind of a quid pro quo agreement going on where he wants her to like leave him things. He asks for certain gifts, and then in return he'll give her information, and it just goes on. So we're following her from like childhood to adulthood in this book. It's such a great story. I reviewed it on my website when I first set the site up, and I got Full Immersion by Gemma Amor on my TBR, and I can't wait to get to that. And I think she's released something else recently as well, but she's like a really great contemporary writer, like someone who's in the field today, and I really, really recommend her writing and her books. Next up, let me give you a book that will put you off being pregnant or having children or anything. Sealed by Naomi Booth. Oh my gosh. So this book is about as a disease. I think it's a disease. I think it's called cutis, or I think that's how you say it. And basically what this disease is doing is it's like sealing over your orifices. So I know that sounds stupid, but it doesn't seem stupid when you're reading it in the book. So yeah, people's, you know, mouths or eyes or ears or whatever are closing up, and so the world is kind of like in a bit of a panic about this, and people are trying to get out of areas where there's like an outbreak of it or whatever. And we're following what's her name? Can never remember the character's name. We're following Alice and Pete, who are a couple who are expecting a baby. She's pregnant, and they've moved to this town where it seems safe, and it's just horrible. You get there and Alice is sort of, you know, fish out of water, doesn't know anyone, and the people in the town are treating her really weirdly. And I thought that this book was going to go in directions, like there are little sort of like teaser little threads about what this story could be, or like what you might expect to read. So it kind of like teases you, like, you know, bait and switches you a lot. And then the end scene is probably one of the most horrific things I've ever read. And it just made me never want to be pregnant, which is unfortunate because I'm in the process of, not to go into my personal life, but I'm hoping to have children soon. Maybe if you are currently pregnant, do not read this. But otherwise, it's quite a good book. It's sort of, I put it on the quiet horror side because it's not like overt like scares or anything, but it's really, really unsettling and quite scary from a medical perspective. Okay, next on my list, I'm going to give you another short story collection. This is the Unheimlich, words. This is the Unheimlich Manoeuvre by Tracy Fahey. I'm so sorry, Tracy, if you see this. I know I always get your surname wrong when I'm trying to pronounce it. I don't know what's wrong with me. But yeah, it's a really, really solid short story collection that was brought out by the Sinister Horror Company. And I really love that press. I think that they pick really good writers to publish, and I collect all of their books. I think I have almost everything they put out to date. But this, I just adored it, because the thing about Tracy is she'll give you a really interesting story, and it's like mounting horror, creeping dread. You're not really sure what the punch is going to be, but oh my god, will she punch you? Like, you think, oh, this is a short horror story, so it's going to disturb me, but you have no idea how much she's going to disturb you. She writes endings like no one else. Like, every single story, I'd be really enjoying it, and then I'd get to the end and have like my mind blown by how she ended the story. So yeah, that's sort of a trait as a writer that I'm actually really jealous of. That's not a strength of mine for sure. And yeah, you just don't know where Tracy's gonna take you with any of these stories, and she's gonna punch you right in the gut with them, a lot of them. So I really recommend this. It's a great sort of mix of words. It's a great mix of subgenres. There's something in here for everyone, as the cliche goes with a short story collection. But yeah, it's really true of this book. What a brilliant read! I went for a variation on my normal. Next, let's go with Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. She was interviewed on the Talking Scared podcast, by the way. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, if you enjoy author interviews, that's the best podcast I found for it. It's hosted by this guy, Neil, and he recently had Stephen King on there as a guest, and I was really impressed by that, because hardly anyone can ever get Stephen King as a guest on anything these days. But yeah, there was a really, really interesting interview with her on that podcast. So that's Talking Scared pod. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. I just really like it. That's why I've mentioned it. So this is about a woman who, I think it's her cousin. Her cousin's having a bit of bother, so she goes to stay with her and her husband, and the house is not quite right. It's not right, I tell you. It's super creepy. I really liked where the story went. I've seen very split opinions on it, but if you're someone who is a fan of sort of gothic stories or like ghost stories, I'm not saying that that's what this is, but if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, I think that you would enjoy this book. So it's one for people who like spooky but with a different edge, shall we say. Next up, I'm going to tell you about another indie book. It's a short story that I bought from ChillerCon, which was an event I went to last year. A Small Thing for Yolanda by Jan Edwards. I had never read any Jan Edwards before, and I met her at this convention, and she was trading, and she was really, really nice. And I did promise myself, I just can't buy any more books. I got too many books on the TBR, but of course, if you go to any sort of bookish convention, that's going to go out the window. But I limited myself to like short stories, like and novellas, for reading time reasons. So I picked this up, and I'd never read any of Jan's work before, and I really enjoyed it. I don't want to tell you the subgenre, because once again, it might be revealed in the back of a synopsis, but it was such a surprise to me when I figured out, when it was revealed to me what type of book this was, that I was really glad I didn't know going in. Does it say? No, it does not. So this is kind of like, I describe this as kind of like a noir spy horror thriller. So it's really outside of the box of what I normally enjoy reading, because apart from the horror part of that, I wouldn't be interested in the description I just gave you otherwise. So I'm really glad that I picked something up that I normally wouldn't read. I really, really recommend it. It's a lovely little lovely little short read if you're having sort of a long coffee break or something like that, or like a nice little quiet lunch, maybe a little break during your day. So I recommend that, and I really enjoyed it. Still trying to think of better final lines. Next up, I'm just going to give you this bunch because these are all kind of like ghosty stories. So I say a bunch, it's just two. So I've got the Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. and there's still post-its in this from when I wrote a review, and Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. These are both so creepy. So this one is we've got like multiple timelines, so we're switching between people in different timelines, but there's like, so we're tracking sort of like a history and a pattern of events. This is really creepy, and this is one of my favorite books that I've read in years. I'm not a huge fan of like haunting kind stories, even though there are a few on this list, obviously, but that just goes to show how good these were, like how exceptional these stories were to me, because in general, I'm just not very interested in like spooky ghost stories. I prefer, you know, apocalyptic, witches, vampires, and things like that. So yeah, but this was like really up there. This is like probably my top 5 favorite books of the entire year last year, so I really loved this. And then this one is absolutely perfect for if it snows. So, you know, if you're in the UK, you really can't count on that, but it's definitely a winter read. I mean, read it at any time of year that you want, but if you're reading it, you want it to be dark, at least, I would say, because if you're reading it in the dark, I think that that's the most effective way to enjoy all of the spooks, because this is super creepy. The setting, you might be able to guess just from the cover, is, you know, very isolated, dark, cold type of place and feel. So yeah, these are two of like the better sort of ghosty stories. This one is much quieter and more and subtle than this one, but I don't know, neither of these are my normal preference, but I just love them both. Okay, next up, this is the last short story collection I'm going to tell you about. This is also an indie writer, Rachel Knightley of Black Shuck Books, and then I've also got this collection by Penny Jones from Black Shuck. So from Rachel Knightley we've got Beyond Glass, and then from Penny Jones we've got Suffer Little Children. Oh my god, this is absolutely savage. So these are sort of themed collections. So the thing with the Black Shuck Shadows books, they're all written by different authors, and then the author picks a theme or something that ties all the story together. So I really loved themed collections like that. You know, obviously this is sort of like a children-centered collection, and it is absolutely savage. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that you could read very easily if you're a parent. So you know, read it before you become a parent, or you know, if you're extra tough, maybe read it if you're a parent. So yeah, this is horror that centers around children, whether they're sort of like perpetuating the horror or on the receiving end of it, and I haven't really read anything like it, and it scarred me for life, but in the good way that you want horror to scar you for life. And then Beyond Glass is like really sort of thoughtful story, like thought-provoking stories, different types of horror again, and it starts and ends with two like very obviously connected stories, and I really enjoyed that. I thought, what a great way to sort of bookend a collection. Also really savage, and I really enjoyed Rachel Knightley's writing, and that was the first book by her I read, and I can't wait to read more. It was great. Oh, I did it again. Oh, this is such a good book. The last ones we're going to talk about. Oh, what order do I go in? Let's go with Shirley Jackson. We Have Always Lived in the Castle and The Lottery. So We Have Always Lived in the Castle isn't like run-of-the-mill Shirley Jackson's book. Not that Shirley Jackson is run-of-the-mill. She also wrote The Haunting of Hill House. But this is about two sisters that live together, and they're kind of like social pariahs because there's a rumour in the town that one of them is responsible for the death of someone else in the family. And it's so it's very like family orientated story, and then someone comes swooping in and everything looks like it's going to change, and you know, one of the sisters is not very happy about that. And so yeah, this is kind of like a family drama with like a horror slant, I would say. It's not super scary, but it's very like unnerving, and you spend the whole time like your brain's ticking over, you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on here and what certain people might do. So I enjoyed that. And then The Lottery is like the shortest short story you've ever read in your life, about a town that does an annual lottery draw, And let's just say you would want to win this lottery. It's just such a great idea, and I'm pretty sure it's like the impetus for things like the Hunger Games and you know, the Running Man and things like that. Stephen King's The Long Walk, things like that. So this is, yeah, this is, oh, Battle Royale. Sorry, I can't just keep listing. It's that kind of fiction in any case, and it's really good. And then the very last book on the list, and I've saved it for last because I've just loved this book for so long. And some people will argue that this isn't horror, but I suppose it's not horror enough for those people, but it's Interview with the Vampire. And at this juncture, I'd like to say it's Interview with the Vampire, not a vampire. I forget that sometimes. I haven't seen the new TV show, but I really like the adaptation with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. And Kirsten Dunst, who absolutely slammed that performance. Like, what a great performance from a child. I can't imagine being a child, portraying a child that then grows up into a woman who is still stuck in the body of a child. Like, I don't know how she managed to get into that headspace, but she was great. So the book is about Louis, a somewhat melancholy, depressed-sounding vampire who is not happy with his existence, and he's telling the story of how he became a vampire. And he's talking about Lestat, who sired him, and their little life together. It's a great story. It's really great. When I first read it, I preferred a couple of the sequels over this one, but then I reread it a couple of years ago, and I really much prefer this now. I just think it's beautiful. It's beautifully written, and the relationships between everything in this are really beautifully written, even though we're talking about vampires. And like Lestat is a particularly nasty character, but I don't know, the exploration of all of these bonds and everything between them, and they set up a little family unit. I just really, really like this. I'm not a huge fan of like everything that came in the series after, but I did, you know, this, and then I'd say maybe the first 4 or 5 books after I really, really enjoyed in the series. I'm going to carry on reading them. I do have them all on the shelf behind me, so I'm going to get to that by the end of the year, I think. But yeah, if you like vampires and you like sort of a more classic feel, so she's not, you know, a classic writer. She was, Anne Rice recently died, but she was around recently writing. You know, we're not going back 200 years, but she's got a really nice sort of classic Gothic feel to her writing style. If that's something that you enjoy, but you're looking for something more contemporary story-wise, this is a great book for you. So that's about 15 or so of my favourite horror written by women that I've read recently. There will be a part 2 of this video because I neglected ebooks entirely. Those were all my physical copies, and then I thought, wait, but what about things I have e-copies of? And the list would have I would have had about 30 books if I'd done that. So there will be a part 2 coming. I don't want to give anything away, but there are completely different authors on that list, and some of them are in the splatterpunk extreme horror genre, if that's maybe more your speed. So look out for that video. That'll be probably coming up in the next month or so, I would say. I'll put that one together. If you have any more recommendations for me for more sort of female written horror or female protagonists, I'd be interested in that. I love male written horror, male protagonists, and I'm not, and you know, female protagonists written by men, but I'm really trying to like diversify my bookshelves a bit here. I'm trying, but if you Google, it's just a wall of noise coming at you, and I would just prefer personal recommendations. I find that much easier. So yeah, let me know what I should be adding to my TBR and what I should be reading next. I still haven't thought of a way to end my video, so I'm just gonna say please